move on, Keith, and talk about Nottingham Forest. Talking of Nottingham Forest, now they're actually considering plans, Keith, to move away from the City ground out of the current area. What are your thoughts around that potential decision from Maranakis and the club?
Well, again, another interesting situation. I have been following this quite closely because I went to Nottingham University when I was obviously much, much younger. But in fact, it was so long ago. It was when Forest were actually in their heyday. And so I do understand the Forest ground, City ground, and the whole city of Nottingham quite well. Look, to me, it's a classic battle here between Maranakis, who is obviously a very wealthy businessman and a very hard-nosed businessman, a very successful businessman. And listen, those Greek shipping magnates are not known for their softness in negotiations, believe me. And I think this has become a case where the city probably upset him when they started looking for a huge lease increase. They saw a Premier League club and they thought it was a cash cow, and they thought they'd get their pound of flesh. Big miscalculation. I think to poke the Maranakis bear in the eye was the wrong thing to do. And so straight away they've got this other option in the area called Totten, just near the Derbyshire-Nottinghamshire border towards Long Eaton. I know the area very well, but it's about 6 miles outside the city. I don't think the fans would be happy about it, but nevertheless, the argument from Maranakis is that we can build a 50,000, if not more, seat stadium, greater revenue potential, and really build for the future. Now that's okay, I get that, but I think it really is just leverage against the city council. And I've seen already they've come back, I believe, with an offer of the freehold for 10 million, which is vastly different to what was being offered or asked for before from the city. So it seems they realised that they could have miscalculated the threats from Mr. Maranakis, and that he's quite capable of carrying them out. Now, when you look at that valuation of the 10 million for the freehold, from what I've looked at, it does look as though that's at the top end of any valuation. And so I still see Mr. Maranakis in the media today even saying that, he's unhappy with the whole situation. I think the city have got themselves into a pretty poor negotiating position now, and I think he's going to force it home. And he's going to say, okay, right, if you really want a Premier League club in your city, right in the heart of the city, as City Ground is, then I'm afraid you're going to have to come down a lot more, even from the 10 million. And while the city council have a duty to get value for their, for the people of the city, I understand that. They've also got to look at the whole economic value that the Premier League club brings to the city as well. And when they start looking at that, I think they're going to have to drop their price. And I think we're going to come somewhere around to about 4 or 5 million for the freehold. And I think that City will have played their cards all wrong. And I think Forest will then go ahead. They will try and redevelop the City ground. And I think they will try and get it to 40 to 45,000 and go from there. But I think that's one of the cases of somebody miscalculating about how to deal with Premier club owners.
I mean, Keith, if it does turn out that that's not possible and they do have to leave, Maranakis said it'll be hard to leave the ground. But I mean, given the importance of revenue streams, moving to a new stadium will take the club to a new level. What are your thoughts? And from his perspective, where do you think he sees it going? Do you think there is a chance that the City ground could be renovated, or actually, do you think from his perspective, moving away actually for the club will be best bet?
No, I think he would prefer to stay at the City ground, I'm sure. And I think the City ground can be renovated. I believe there are plans in place that can take it to 40 or 50. Obviously, it has the river as one boundary, and as we know, on one end. But I think there are ways to do it, from what I understand. I think the fans apparently made their feelings pretty clear at the weekend, chanting against the move away from City ground. I think Maranakis understands the soul of the club is based on that sort of location. It's a very historical location, obviously next to Notts County, etc. And it is just a walk to the station and a walk into the city. It's a great location. It's perfect. So I think there's an understanding of that. But I think he had to offer the option. Sometimes cities miscalculate, and this is a pretty clear negotiation. And I've been through this before, when you have to show that there's a real option at stake. Now, if you can imagine, we were under the American situation like the NFL or the NBA when it was a franchise situation, then Nottingham would have been actually paying money to have a club come into Nottingham if they were trying to attract a franchise situation, rather than have the club pay them. And so, if we ever get to that horrible situation, where we do get franchises and clubs can move around, then you'd see city councils falling over themselves to try and attract it. So they've got to be realistic about what they're expecting. And I've had this fight before with local police before, with chief constables about the cost of policing. And people just don't realise the impact now that the Premier League is having for local economies. And there's got to be more respect for that, I think, from local authorities.
Do you think, Keith, similar to St James's Park, more English grounds that are really iconic, like the City Ground, need to be protected, and actually the council need to do more to ensure they do stay in the city to bring in those revenue streams, both for the club and for the city?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's more a realism about what the clubs actually get and do for the cities. I mean, the hotel sectors, the restaurant sectors, the bar sectors, the taxi drivers, there's so much that goes on. And there's so many other things that impact in a local city that rely now on match day. Even the move from at Everton from Goodison down to the new stadium will impact certain small businesses in certain areas. Even though the money will stay in the city, it will still impact certain businesses. If they were to lose the club at Nottingham and they were to go to this new site 6 miles out of the city, I think it would have a dramatic impact on the city. And I think you'd see an uprising from the local businesses, really would. And so there is a value that the clubs have now. They have not been very vocal in terms of trying to push that down the throats of local authorities, if you know what I mean. But they should start adopting a more aggressive approach when local authorities come and try and take the mickey, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of valuations and charges for leasing.
And to wrap up, Keith, on this section, Maranakis said actually that the current PSR systems are unfair and it isn't aligning with the ever-increasing costs in football. Do you agree with that? And actually, do you think that most owners are feeling the same about this concern, that the PSR rules aren't matching up with how much actually you need to spend to stay in the Premier League?
Absolutely, 100% agree with him. The whole point of what we would call football inflation has not been allowed to be factored in. There should probably be a charge every year, just like the CPI. There should be some sort of increase every year for inflation in football that would make the breach barrier grow. So we're 105 million right now. It really should be somewhere near 200, in which case there would have been no PSR breaches at all. I've also talked about having clubs that get promoted, maybe like Ipswich, next year. Should they be given 2 or 3 years, to amnesty, if you like, to be able to try and improve their squads and try and give them a chance at stability in the Premier League? So I think a combination of both those factors, some sort of amnesty for promoted clubs and some sort of inflation factor for the breach level, then I think that would be a much fairer system. And I think everybody would understand it. And it seems quite logical, not as though we're asking for anything ridiculous. So I think those two common sense positions would make a big difference and allow everybody to see a more competitive Premier League, which is what we all want.